Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk to Experts Tuesday. We are so excited to have all of you here with us today. My name is Jamie Gregory, and I will be your moderator for this session. This webinar series is designed to give all of you an hour with a few of our product experts. You can use this time to ask them questions, and it also gives you an opportunity to get to know us a little bit. So today's session is on Qlik Gold Client, and we do have a few housekeeping items for today. Everyone is on mute, so please use the Q&A panel to ask your questions. We will not necessarily be using the panel to respond to your questions, as we are going to try to get to everyone's questions live today. If you hopped on to get your question answered and then you have to leave, that's okay. You should receive a prompt for a survey. Please take this survey. It takes less than a minute to fill out, and you can give us some feedback on how we can improve these sessions, or you can also suggest another topic you would like to see in the future. The topic does not have to be about a product overall. It can be pretty specific. We've had some great suggestions like security rules in Qlik Sense, using multiple Qlik products together, Qlik Replicate, dynamic views, mashups. The sky is the limit. We just want to make sure that we're allowing all of you the opportunity to ask us the questions that you need answers to. Again, all feedback is appreciated. And if you do not receive a prompt for the survey, you can email us any feedback at digital@qlik.com. And if you think of a topic later on, feel free to email us as well. I'll go ahead and put that email address in the chat for you in just a little bit here. And also today, we are doing a raffle for some Qlik swag. So you'll be automatically entered in the raffle by filling out that survey. All right, so we do ask that you keep the questions related to the topic at hand, again, which is for today, Qlik Gold Client. So use the Q&A panel below to get your questions in. And while we wait for all of you to enter in your questions, I will go ahead and take the time to introduce everyone on the panel. So we have Lindsay Foster, Senior Solution Engineer for SAP, Steve George, Senior Solution Engineer for SAP, and Steve Chabala, Director of Product Deployment for SAP. Lindsay, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. Lindsay Foster. I have been with the Qlik organization with Gold Client for the last 8 or so years, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you, Lindsay. And Steve George.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Steve. I have been with Qlik for 13 years. I was actually a customer. That's how I was introduced to it, the solution at first. Had a chance to join the team. My principal background is functional, primarily in the MM and SD and PM modules, and I'm located in Boise, Idaho.
Great, thank you, Steve. And Steve Chabala.
Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Chabala. I manage the Gold Client services and support teams. I've been working with Gold Client for over 13 years and been working on SAP landscapes for over 20 years. And I am located near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have all of you here today. Again, my name is Jamie Gregory. I'm the Community Operations Manager here at Qlik. I am located in Raleigh, and I have Raleigh, North Carolina. And I've been with Qlik for about 3 years, just over 3 years now. And my primary focus is administering the back end of our great Qlik community. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll just jump right into the questions. Again, please use the Q&A panel to get your questions in. You can tell that we have a great wealth of knowledge here, so let's use this time to get some questions in. All right, so the first question, I do believe we have some before we jump into the questions, if someone could just give an overview of what Qlik Gold Client is, I think that would be super helpful.
Yeah, sure, Jamie, I can take care of that. So Qlik Gold Client is a data solution, SAP based, so it's written in ABAP. It's a solution that runs on your SAP landscape, allows you to copy SAP data from one system to another, typically used in production to extract SAP data in production, things such as transactional and master data, extract that from production and copy it down to a lower environment, development, QA, test. This allows you to get real quality data from your production system down to your lower environments for testing and training, troubleshooting purposes, much quicker than doing a full system copy, a full database copy, which obviously require a lot more time and effort.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. I think that was very helpful. Thank you, Steve. Someone was like, yes, an overview. So we got that covered. All right, first question, where can I find more information about Gold Client?
Steve, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Well, we have some user guides, obviously, that, have that just kind of par for the course. But we do have, as you've already mentioned, Jamie, a community out there as well. Let me actually go ahead and share my screen.
Okay,
That's okay.
no problem. Yep, just give me a second. I have a lot of windows up and then I lose them. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. All right, sorry about that.
So once it's shared, I have a web browser open, and you can see that I have the Qlik Gold Client webpage up. So this is actually under the principal domain is help.qlik.com, as you can see in the address bar here. Once you're up here, though, you can, let's see, am I sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Once you're there, then there's a way to drill down to the Gold Client library. And so once you're in Qlik Gold Client, you can scroll down and see that we have our latest version of our documentation down here. We usually keep 2 versions, the most recent version and then -1, because we understand that not all customers are going to be able to upgrade right away. So you can usually see N and -1 versions out here. These are all PDFs. You can see there's a library of about, I think it's 14 or 15 user guides. If you click on one of these, it's simply a PDF. So it's going to open up on your machine, and you can scroll down through that. So this is really some wonderful content. Of course, this is great for new users or somebody who maybe has moved away from Gold Client, hasn't used it for a while, especially if maybe the organization's recently upgraded and they want to be able to understand what the new content is, new functionality. This is the best way to get your hands available on this. Let me see, I need to hide this guy up here. It's kind of in the way. Sorry about that. It doesn't usually sit there right at the top of the screen, and it's kind of blocking my browsers.
That happens to me all the time on these sessions.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I can move it. I didn't realize that. Okay.
You can
so
move
now
it
I've moved it out of the way. Yeah. Sorry about that. So we do have, of course, a qlikcommunity.com again is the principal domain. But what I wanted to really share is that within here, obviously, you can go to a couple of places. But for example, you can get to forums, data integration, and then we have Qlik Gold Client. There's a couple different ways to get out to these principal pages, but I already have the pages open just to save time. So this is the main page. This is where all the new postings are. So Sue, who also works out in our community, has made a posting recently. You can see some of my colleagues like Aaron, Steve's got stuff out here as well. You'll see some postings by me, not so much in this space. But this is just content that we're pushing out that we want the community, we want our user community to be aware of. Things like, hey, when is a new version 8.7.1 is available? Here's our Talk to Experts Tuesday that we've been promoting for a while, et cetera. And then also, and I think I take a little bit of particular pride in this content because I probably helped develop a fair amount of it, but we have an FAQ that sits out here. So if you want to come out and ask a question or read a previously posted question, you can do that. Is Gold Client supported for S/4HANA, et cetera, et cetera. You can go through that and you can load more and more. You can search for latest top topics, the ones that are the most widely viewed, et cetera, et cetera. But I do want to call out specifically that we've been on a little bit of a journey here to build out some video-based content. You can see some of those here that Steve has actually put out here. So like how to use import control, how to use data snap, how to query data types, et cetera, even an introduction. So for those of you who may be on this call who don't really know that much about Gold Client and you want a bit more content, you can view this video. And we're keeping these right in the 6 to 8 minute space. So it's pretty easily consumable content. And this is something that's going to continue. It is to be honest, and a day over day, a fairly low priority, but it is a journey that we're going to continue on pushing out more of this video-based content. So I would certainly encourage customers, especially new users, people who want to be able to understand how to use Gold Client more effectively. I think those videos are going to help, just round out that content that we already had out there on top of everything else. So I would say the community and those user guides are really the best places. I don't know if I missed anything, Steve, but those are the 2 high points.
No, it's great, Steve. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. On the digital support team, we love GIFs. So I don't know if you can start incorporating some GIFs out there, but just a suggestion. All right, let's go to the next question. I would like to add one user at a time that is from our Active Directory without the full import of users. I can't do this with my current system. Can I do it with Gold Client? In actuality, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay, Jamie. Yeah, I saw that already. Really, Active Directory is, Gold Clients, as I mentioned at the beginning, is meant to run in SAP landscapes, and usually Active Directory is outside of that. So like I said, Gold Client meant to copy SAP data. We do have methods within SAP to copy user information, and obviously within Gold Client we can copy some of that as well. But as if it's within SAP, then we can copy some user data. If it's outside of SAP, then no, Gold Client won't be able to do that.
Okay. No problem. All right, thank you. Let's see, next question. I am Krishna from Dana. Steve Chabala knows me as I keep bothering him. I do not think that is the case, Krishna. One of the problems we've had is about pulling some table data like customer standard tables, which are not part of Gold Client. Is there any standard utility which can identify which tables and data and not part of Gold Client and show the relations?
Yeah, well, hello, Krishna. Good to hear from you. We'll tell you we have our resident Gold Client configuration experts on the call here. Steve, George, and Lindsay both manage our Gold Client configuration for all our various SAP landscapes that we support. So I'm going to field Steve or Lindsay. One of you want to take that question on how to manage the configuration?
I can go ahead and take this one. Jamie, I'm going to share my screen just to show some of these utilities that we have.
Perfect.
Okay. If I can find it. Okay. All right. Is it sharing?
Not yet.
Doesn't look like it.
There, it's coming up.
All right.
Perfect.
So yes, within Gold Client, there are actually a few areas that you can utilize to help you look for tables and their relationships within your SAP environment, just based on the Gold Client configuration that you currently have in your system. So I am in one of our environments here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the configuration menu down here. If you are not on one of our newer versions of Gold Client, you will see that the framework screen, our configuration screen, is a little bit different now. But this is where we would go in order to find these utilities that we're looking for. So what I would suggest you utilize down here at the bottom now, it used to be up at the top, but under administration, we've got an installation setup utility that is down here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open this up, and I'm just going to click on installation setup. And there's the utility in here that is to configure custom tables. So I'm going to go ahead and select this checkbox, and you'll see that you can enter a namespace value here. So for us, we'll utilize by default the Z and the Y characters, but if you had a custom namespace in your environment, you could of course add those here as well. So now when you utilize this activity here, this utility, go ahead and hit the execute button. So what this is doing is this is taking a look at those tables that are within your actual namespace that you've entered on this screen, and it is comparing the primary key data elements of the custom tables to what already exists within the Gold Client framework. So we're really looking for those header tables of our data types. So things like, KNA1 for customer master, LFA1 for vendor master, MARA for the material master area. And if it finds a match between the two data elements within the system, it'll actually show you how you can link this into the Gold Client configuration. It's quite slow today. I don't use this system very often. And what it'll do is it'll actually show you where the data type is on the screen, with the fields that it wants to link those records into.
Maybe while this is running, Lindsay, Krishna had a second question. Maybe we can address that, Jamie, while this is running.
Perfect. So the second question is, how could I overwrite all the data with the data we are copying regardless of conflicting data or non-conflicting data with Gold Client and without performing the custom client copy?
Yep. So really it would be better to utilize our best practices. If it's an existing system that was not built with Gold Client best practices, your data is very well going to be different between those two systems. So anything that, maybe on the transactional side is going to, be overwritten with, say, master data. We want to be very careful of that. Within client construct, you can delete the table data before import. So if you are looking to do this for just, say, master data, you can actually go in and find every table that exists on the export and then delete those table entries prior to your data being imported into the target system. And that's speaking from a client construct perspective. Steve, do you want to take data echo?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's worth mentioning here, since Tristan has asked the question, that we do have some recommended best practices when you're refreshing an SAP client. And that's either to start out with a completely empty client and then build that up with a configuration or customizing copy, whichever term you prefer, they're considered interchangeable. Load that up with your SAP customizing, then all of your master data, and then whatever subset of transactional data. The alternative option to that is we do have customers who, even though they still use Gold Client, there are still valid use cases for doing a full system copy. Now, a lot of Gold Client customers buy Gold Client because they don't want to do a database copy anymore, and that's understandable. But in the real world of SAP and all the projects and requirements that come up month over month, year over year, customers will still find, in many cases, a way to do a system copy. And then in those cases, what they'll do is they'll use Gold Client then to do Delta copies on top of that system refresh. There's a customer over in Portland who, for one of their primary objectives, was to get away from doing quarterly full system refreshes. And so they brought in Gold Client, so that way their application team could copy over data whenever they needed it. So their basis team went from doing 4 system copies a year down to 1. And then what they basically tell their application team is, okay, we'll see you in 12 months when we're scheduled to do the next system copy. In the meantime, you have Gold Client to copy whatever data you want and lay down on top of the copy that we recently performed. So those are really the two best practice methods. And the reason why is because both of those are going to lead to a very high level of data integrity. There's just so many thousands of data connection points, data relations within the SAP data model, that anything that falls within those two extremes, either starting with nothing or starting with a full system copy, can lead to questionable data integrity, could lead to data inconsistencies, put to the point where it's so severe that people may not be able to transact. I mean, I don't want to sound like worst case situation, but I've actually seen that happen with some of our customers because of the way they went around refreshing the client. So I think following our best practices will more often than not lead to success for the team.
Perfect.
I don't know if there's anything else we need to add to that topic or not.
No, I think that's good, Steve. Lindsay, now that the report came up, do you want to walk through this report then?
Yep, sure will. So I can see now why this took so long, had a lot of Y and Z tables here, more than I was expecting. But just to give you guys some examples, these are a list of our custom tables that exist out in our database. And what we're doing is we're looking at the table structures, and we're finding the data type within Gold Client that we think this would best be linked up to. Now you'll notice for this particular table here, we actually have found quite a few connections. So we have the 01, and then this one is TC. What this is telling us is that if I go ahead and I select these items, because these are the correct linkages for me, what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and automatically put this table within my Gold Client data type. So I'm going to utilize MM invoice receipts, material documents, my billing docs from rebates, and then my SD billing documents. So within Gold Client, what we can do is we can go ahead and we can actually hit this accept button. And I'll go ahead and do this for you. So go ahead and hit accept here. And now I've automatically added this into the configuration. So if I just open this window up and I'll do this, go in here, and I'll just put in invoice receipt and go to my data type manager.
We're not seeing your other screen, Lindsay. Sorry to interrupt. We're still seeing your output.
Oh, yeah, I shared just the one. I wish it makes sense. Thank you. All right, so Gold Client and then Data Snap. If I open up invoice receipt by the data type manager, this is also in the framework area, I'll now see that my custom table has been added into my configuration of this data type and all of the other ones as well. So this is done automatically for you. There is a bit of analysis that does need to be done with this. Sometimes the linkages aren't always going to be 100% perfect. But this allows you to at least get an idea of where these tables belong and which ways that they can be incorporated in, especially if, there's just not enough time for the team to look at this, or if ABOP can't be involved in this as well. These are ways that you can go ahead and get this done yourself.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. So Krishna had a couple of other questions as well. So can you bring in how about some of the SAP standard custom tables that start with S or A?
Yeah, those are fine. I mean, you can bring in basically, Gold Client will support the copying of data that resides in a transparent table, a pooled table, or a cluster table. So it's just a matter of identifying. I mean, if the configuration wasn't provided by default, you can either add them yourself, or if you're struggling with how to do that, how to best do that, you can always, submit a support case, Krishna, as I know you have done before, and, give us some specifics about what your requirements are, what you're trying to achieve, and we'll respond in kind.
Perfect. And then one more from Krishna. I think my question is more specific, like copying the data for a single plant, but I need to overwrite the entire plant data. So how can I make Gold Client overwrite the data regardless of conflicts, non-conflicts?
I'm not sure that I fully understand that question. I'm assuming when we're talking plant, we're probably talking, say, like plant material data specific to one plant or multiple plants. Obviously, Gold Client enables the user to be able to selectively copy data in many different ways, including based on plants. And then as far as whether the data is conflicting or not, for anyone who on this call is been a user of Gold Client, you would know that when you go to run an import, you're going to be asked every single time, what do you want to do with that data that might already exist in the client? Do I want to replace it or do I want to skip it? So whether it exists or not, you would use that replace option, because then it's either going to append new data that's not existing, or it's going to overlay the data that's already in the database. It'll, in essence, refresh it.
Perfect. I hope that helps. Great job, everyone. We are getting some questions in the chat. If people wouldn't mind, just remember to use the Q&A panel to get your questions in. It's really helpful for us to monitor. The chat can, go up and down really quickly. So if they're in the Q&A panel, it's a little bit easier for us to manage. Let's see. How long does a client copy take?
That is a loaded question because there's lots of moving parts to it, like I had mentioned. And let's be clear. Gold Client is not intended or designed to be a replacement for a system copy or a database copy, for those of you who are a basis person on this call. So when you're refreshing or when you're using Gold Client and our best practices process, what we're suggesting you do is typically you're going to start out with an empty client, right? It's not going to have any data there. Then you're going to need to export your SAP customizing from the source, wherever you want to grab that from. and import that into the client. Then there's actually a post-processing step beyond that. And then you will then want to load, export, and import your master data. And at some point, some customers, that's all they want. They want fresh business production-like data from, from prod in their lower level system, whether it's QA, dev, training, sandbox, wherever it is. And then they'll just use that master data to transact against, right? So they're going to test, or they're going to run whatever executions they want. Maybe it's an interface. Who knows what the use case is. But I will say the large majority of customers will then grab a subset of transactional data, perhaps like a month or 6 months, or maybe if it's something like a training use case where training is very surgical, you don't need volume data for training. You usually need very specific data sets in order to execute the training class, whatever the content it's covering. So you're bringing over minimal data in that case, lay that down and lay it on top of the master data. And then you'll be able to go in and, essentially what you've got in that case is if you're using production as your source for, say, you're configuring your data, you essentially have a production-like lower level client that behaves like production because you've copied the config from there, and looks like production because you've copied the data from there. The only difference is you didn't copy, 10 years worth of transactional data. You copied 6 months or a month or something. But from a testing and a training perspective, it's going to look and feel and seem like it's production. And that's what that's the selling point of Gold Client. So how long does it take to complete all of those? It's going to vary in many cases, and many times to the use cases. I would say the config copy, the export and the import, the post-processing, I think is usually 4 hours, maybe.
A couple
Steve,
hours. I'd say a couple hours. Yeah, it really just depends on what phase you want to get to. So the SAP part of doing the config copy, building the new client, loading that initial configuration, usually a few hours. When you move on to the master data, doing a full master data load, that potentially could take a few hours depending on the size of your master data. And then probably the largest piece of it is the transactional data, depending on how much transactional data you want to target, whether it be 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year. That could vary as well. That could run just from a few hours to a whole day, multiple days potentially, depending on the volume of data that you are targeting. So once again, it's just a matter of going through our best practices, setting up the environment, going through the steps, starting with a smaller set of data. If you haven't run the process before, certainly encourage you to start with a smaller set of copying over all the master data, since that's a standard process. But then transactional data, maybe just start with 1 week, target 1 week of data, see what that looks like, see how much time that takes. And then obviously, if you're struggling there, please reach out to us in support, and we can give some advice on optimizing the process so then you can ramp up to go for the whole month, go for 3 months, 6 months, etc. But definitely start small to understand the process and optimize it before you ramp up for larger volume sets.
And I have 2 follow-ups to that. So one, we do have a document that actually covers that process, right? So we're not just verbally giving you the user these instructions. There's a step-by-step PDF that would walk them through what all those various steps are. And the second comment is, it's really easy for a user to say, well, I just want to copy 6 months of data or 18 months of data. But you have to understand that from an SAP perspective, that could literally mean hundreds of millions of records. And for some of our customers, that literally means billions of records collectively across all of those tables. And that's because, again, when you're talking about moving, like, say, even 3 months or 6 months of data, what you're talking about is moving, say, 6 months of sales orders, 6 months of purchase orders, of production orders, of work orders, et cetera. And then the Gold Client configuration will go and get the supporting data object. So in the SD space, we're talking about billing documents, deliveries, the subsequent material documents or goods issues, the financials, and all the stuff that sits down in the FICO space. So when you build that hierarchy or that iceberg, essentially, you're starting at the top saying, here's what I want to start out my selection with, but then it's got to go get all for data integrity purposes. It has to bring down all of the corresponding data. Otherwise, the user's going to go to the target client and go, well, I got part of my data, but it's not really usable because I'm missing so much of this other stuff. So that's where the data echo framework comes into play and goes and gets those subsequent documents. And because of that downstream effect, you could literally bring over tons more data than you realize. So it's easy to say, oh, our use cases bring over 2 years worth of data, but what does 2 years mean to your database, your organization specific database? It's hard to say. And so I think that's another reason why Steve suggests, look, it's better to start out with a smaller data set, optimize the process, learn from, any maybe some mistakes along the way. And then once you've kind of stabilized and you have an idea of what the runtimes are and what the various steps are, then you can always go after more data later. And also keep in mind that if you start out with, let's say, something smaller like 3 months of data, you can always go back and add 3 months later on, and maybe even more and more and more. It's not like you have a one-stop shop that says, oh, we've got to get it right the first time because we can't lay any more data on top of it. Absolutely not.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. All right, next question. How about data snap relation? This is Krishna again, so it may be in relation to one of the other questions. I'm not sure.
May have had to do with it may have had to do with your, if you create maybe a custom data type. I'm going to just assume this is what this is. If you create a custom data type, maybe is there a way to link that? Jamie, I will go ahead and share again. Okay. All right.
And Krishna says you are spot on.
Okay. Let's see, trying to. Share screen. Okay. All right. So SAP again. Pink screen here. All right. So unfortunately, within Gold Client, if you are creating the custom data types, we don't really have any utilities that will automatically link data type A to say data type B here for you. That is something that you would have to do on your own. I will say this. We do, however, have a newer functionality within Gold Client that will actually allow us to create custom data types within our configuration, just helping create kind of these one-offs that we have. This was actually created for divestitures to help our colleague go through and create these data types that she needed in a more effective manner. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into configuration here, and give me 1 second. What I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab that table, that Z table that I just added to this configuration. All right. So I'm going to take this Z table that we have here, and I'll go back to my configuration area. And here under additional tools, and again, I'm on version 8.7.1 right now. So this is our latest version that we have. And down here, I've got create/delete data type. So if I go ahead and click on this, I can actually enter my custom table name here for me. I want to go ahead and specify what type of data type this is. So for us, we have 3 that we utilize: master data, transactional data, and then Z for other, those things that link from point A to point B and that's utilized somewhere else. Just because this is in that kind of MM space and it links to the invoice receipts and the billing docs and everything, I'm going to go ahead and use T for transactional. Now, if this data type that I was created had a child table that was associated to this, I would actually be able to enter what should be a child within the data type, and I'll just leave that blank for now. And then this would show how to link those 2 items together. So I've got this set to create data type, and I can go ahead and hit the execute button. So this just created a custom data type for me. You'll see it here, Z-CCM. And this is now within my data echo framework. So I go through and I at least get the data types created based on the header tables and any child tables and the common fields that they would have. But you would unfortunately have to do the linking from data type A to data type B, just because we don't have any utilities or any real functionality in there that'll do that for you, just because those are pretty intricate details anyways. You need to make sure you have the right parent table, the field, what operators being utilized, equal, greater than or equal to, and then the child, the recipient field on there as well. So partway there, I guess, we do create custom data types for you, but you have to do the linking back here as well. Just to show you, if I go back into my data echo area, and this is where our Our subsetting configuration is held within our Gold Client area. So this is how Gold Client knows how to get, data from these data types. I'll go ahead and click on my display all option and scroll down to the bottom, and I'll see my custom data type that I created right here. So Z-Z, CMM, etc. I've got my tables. So it goes ahead and it adds the tables for us automatically. It adds the common fields. And as you can see, no linkages here, but again, that's because that is a manual process that you have. That's it.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, so we have about 22 minutes left in the session. It is just flying by. You guys are asking some really great questions, and then we have our panelists, and they're doing a fabulous job answering and showing everything. I hope everyone is finding it really helpful. Let's go ahead. We'll keep on moving. We do have a few questions in the pipeline, but if you have any more questions, feel free to use the Q&A panel to get your questions in. And let's keep going. All right. So does Gold Client work with other ERP solutions such as Workday?
Yeah, Jamie, I can field this. Gold Client only works on ABAP-based SAP systems. So I don't believe Workday falls into that. I believe it's a separate type of system. So Gold Client, like I said, just meant to work in the SAP ABAP-based landscapes.
Okay, perfect. And the next question is how to become a Qlik Gold client. I assume client.
Yeah, not sure whether it's just how to get the software. So I'm not quite sure there. We can certainly reach out separately and give some more information on how to if you're interested in a demo, more information, we can certainly send information about that to learn more about the Gold Client process and product.
Perfect. I would say that if you're already a Qlik client, go ahead. You can get the ball rolling by reaching out to your account manager. Otherwise, like Steve said, we can reach out and help facilitate that as well. Okay, so next question. Thanks for the clarification on the client copy. Another question is, how is data masking accomplished?
I can handle that one, Jamie.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I think I'll share my screen.
Yeah,
a little
absolutely.
visual on this one might not hurt. So first thing I want to mention is that Gold Client masks data during the export process. So the data, we keep referring to data copy as if it was almost like one step, but in reality, it's a two-step process. So when you run an export in Gold Client, what it's doing is the program is interrogating your database based on the Gold Client configuration that's been defined, right? Because that's how it's supposed to know, how do I go from one table to the next? How do I do these mappings? What data am I supposed to go extract from the database? So it takes that and then it writes that out as a series of files. So during that process, if there's any transformation or data masking configuration in place, and I'll give you a visual here in just a second, it's actually going to then manipulate that data during the file writing process. So that way, by the time somebody goes and performs the import, there is no post-processing step. There's no gap where somebody has to go and say, oh, now I have to scramble the data, because it's already been done on the front side of the copy. So if you can see my screen here, I'm actually for those of you who have never seen Gold Client before, this is the main dashboard or cockpit, if you will, for Gold Client. And we have this configuration right here called transformation setup. And you have to apologize here. This is a demo system we're in, so it tends to build up some residue and junk over time. It's not usually quite this busy. But in here, what you'll see is a set of configuration. And we do provide out-of-the-box configuration for, I think there's about a dozen what we call rules, which are the highest level part of the configuration here. And underneath each one of the rules, for example, I'm going to just choose this VM01, you'll see a list of tables. And so essentially, this is the list of tables that this rule is going to target. So if you're exporting and importing a set of vendors, then what we're doing based on this configuration is we're trying to target the principal vendor master table, LFA1, along with the banking table, this table here, withholding information, tax information, and then as well as the related address data to some things like names and telephones and location, right? Addresses are actually stored. Sometimes they're in the address, sometimes they're in the principal tables like the vendor or customer or business partner, but a lot of that data also resides in the related address tables. And so again, what we've tried to do is create some comprehensive configuration so that way the customer doesn't have to do anything other than basically use the software. Now in this particular case, you'll notice I opened up table LFA1, and LFA1 then is also saying, okay, what these are the fields that we're going to target during the copy process. So, for most organizations, there's not that much sensitive data in the system with respect to a particular data object. There might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fields related to, again, customer, vendor, business partner, maybe credit card data, maybe your material master has some sensitive data in it. So what we're doing is we're trying to do very selective or surgical data transformation. So you have to build a rule. Your rule has to have one or more tables, and then your tables have to have one or more fields. So for example, for some reason, from a demo perspective, I wouldn't consider this probably in a real world sensitive, but somebody has selected city as a sensitive field and they have added that one into the configuration. And so if we go over here, you can see that what they're wanting to change it to is some default fixed value. And so here's all the different ways that we scramble data out of the box. You can simply nullify the value so that whatever it is in production, it's going to be blank or empty in the non-production client. There's derived fixed value, random from a list, random number, random date, and alphanumeric X1, which means every character gets changed to an X and every number value gets changed to a 1. And then if none of this out of the box stuff works, you can write your own function, your own custom function module. I think there's been 2 customers that I'm aware of or that I've heard that had such elaborate requirements that our out of the box stuff didn't meet their requirements, that they wrote their own custom function module. And so you would write that and call that out in here. So you can see that this is a configurable screen. Once you've got the configuration in place, whether it's something that we provided standard, whether it's custom or a blend of the two, right? You start off, you use ours as a template, and then maybe you expand on that to make sure all of your requirements are covered. You then just simply go in and you go to this part here where you would assign, system is slow. This is where you would then assign the data types to the rule. And the nice thing about this assignment here is this takes out of the equation any user control to say, oh, I want to copy data, but I don't want it to be masked. No, this is where the administrator says, look, the organization says this data is sensitive. We're going to configure Gold Client accordingly. So that way your user groups, whatever they're doing, whenever they're doing it, can still copy the data they need, but any sensitive data has been masked or desensitized, and that eliminates risk to the organization. And so once this assignment is here, the user doesn't have any control, right? They're just copying vendors or customers or whatever data they want, and they may not even know or maybe even care that the data is being masked because somebody at a higher level says this is how it has to be. So we do provide a lot of configuration in this space. I just wanted to provide just a visual rather than talking to it.
Perfect.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I do have an unrelated question for you. Is it really 52 degrees where you're at?
Yeah, touch of fall here in the air.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
It's been towards 100 the last couple of for so long, and now it feels good to have some fall weather instead of the hot summer stuff.
I think it's going to be 105 today, so maybe I'm going to hop in my car and start driving. All right. Thank you so much. All right. So the next question. Lindsay has shown how to limit the amount of data to migrate to the last 5 years of data for an employee. Could she review that process again to limit the data for an employee?
Yep. Jamie, I'll go ahead.
We'll go ahead and stop sharing again.
Yep. It's just easier for us to explain the Gold Client thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so sharing my SAP screen again. It should be sharing here. I did read this one ahead of time, so I figured it was coming. I know who this is coming from as well. So yes, when there's a lot of historical data, especially in the HR space, it's usually where we see this. You could have years and years and years of history that is behind your HR master data. one of the abilities that we have is to go in and we want to pull everything, but we want to get it up to a certain time frame. So there's really two pieces that you kind of have to work on this at. One is going to be within the Gold Client configuration in your statements, and then the other one is going to be something called a global scenario variable. So just to give an example of this, I'm going to use our HR employee master with pay posting data. And if I come down here to where my HR payroll directory is, and I've double clicked this, I can see my statement in order and how I'm linking this together. So when I pull my HR master data, how can I get my transactional objects? That's all done right here. So what we'll do with customers that have a lot of historical data is we will actually add a secondary line down here on our linkage statement in order to minimize the amount of data that we're pulling. So for a lot of our customers, it just depends on your requirements, but you may only need, say, 5 years worth of payroll data, or maybe 10 years, but maybe you don't need all 20 years. So what we'll do is we'll use these global scenario variables. Let me go ahead and back up here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on additional tools and double click on global scenario variables right here. And again, this is a demo system. There's a lot of information right here. You should have next to none of this. But what you can do is you can actually put in the different items that you want to use here for this. So if we look at the ones I have highlighted here, you'll see that I've got payroll directory creation dates, payroll directory, end of payroll, and then there is the payroll directory pay date. So this is just an example again, what's being utilized just within our system. So if I want to utilize the creation date, when was this data created, I can go ahead and use this one. And when I look over here, I will see my date value that's been input into this window. So 12/31/08. This can be modified. So if I change this and just scroll back down again, maybe I want to grab, we'll just do, say, maybe the last 4 years worth of data, maybe 6 years. I could do, well, this is an older system, so my apologies. I will keep it a little bit older, just do 10 on this. So if I go ahead and hit that save button, this is now my variable for this. So payroll directory AirDat. So once I've created the variable and the date that I want to utilize for this, I need to go in and configure my linkage statement from data type A to data type B. So I'll go back into data echo here, open up the HR and mask with pay posting, and double click on linkages. So if I scroll down and double click on my payroll directory, I want to add my secondary line here. So I'll go ahead and select the change button and then our create button, and I'm going to put in and the table name. So this is our directory table. And I'm going to go ahead and grab that AirDat, E-R-D-A-T field. All right, and I'll just do a search for it. Okay, so not on there, but we could just use the start payroll dates instead. And then what I want to do is I want to actually utilize the greater than or equal to value here, because I want any data that has been created after that date that I have input into the screen. So we'll go ahead and we can grab either the GE greater than or equal to, or the actual operator values here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to this value column that you see here, and I can utilize this drop down. And when I utilize this drop down, all of these global scenario variables that we have are actually listed out here that we can utilize. So the reason we do this rather than putting in a hard-coded value, you can do that, of course. If you look at your configuration and these areas where we have them limited at, you may have 5 or plus linkages that would need to be modified every time you update that date. Some customers, they update the date once a year. Other customers every few years. It really just depends on, that organization. If I go in and make the changes up front, add this line into my statements, I only have to modify the date one time in global scenario variables instead of 6 times, here in the Gold Client framework. So it just makes it easier for you guys moving forward. So Now, what we've done here is we're saying, okay, I want to get the payroll data for my employee, but I'm going to limit it and only grab the data from 2010 on. Again, I put it that way just because the system is a little bit older for us. It's an IDES system, a demo, so don't have the best data there, but that'll limit that high volume transactional data that you have within your SAP area.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. Again, this session is being recorded. So if you ever need to reference, this video will be posted out on the Qlik community. I'll go ahead and show everyone where that is. Just give me 1 second while I get the website pulled up. So we're here out on community.qlik.com. If we go to support and then programs and then talk to experts Tuesday, recordings all get posted here under past events. And so the recording will be here in the next couple weeks. So you can always reference the recording if you need to rewatch that demo. You guys have done some amazing demos today, so I'm really excited that we'll have this information out there on the Qlik community for everyone. All right. So we have about 6 minutes left. So I'm going to do a last call for questions. We have one more in the pipeline. So I'll go ahead and read that one off. We are having trouble with number range after we copied the data, although we ran the number range utility with 20%, especially some of the finance range like flag flex. This is causing duplicated dumps in ST22 and leading to failure of a transaction. Is there any way Gold Client can find the used document numbers and come up with a proposal of what could be the new range, then updating with one default percent like 5 or 10, etc.?
Yeah, Jamie, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jamie, I'll take this one. So Krishna, what I will say is when we designed the number range solution, oh boy, I think it's now been close to 10 years ago, 9 years ago. It's been a while. We considered, trying to be, during the import process, we were originally trying to design a solution that would kind of check against what the number range objects were and then do like an increment. But because there's thousands upon thousands of different number range objects, that was a very challenging solution. I think it was going to be very daunting to come up with something that would work in a consistent and reliable manner. And so instead, we ended up with a design that is in place now and has been in place, like I said, for close to a decade. The nice thing about the solution that we have now is not only is it easier to deploy, but it's a one-time execution, right? Ideally, whenever a refresh occurs, we already talked about this earlier during this Q&A, is that as one of those best practice recommendations, one of the steps we didn't actually talk about as far as copying the config and the data, you also want to run this number range buffer utility. You mentioned you've ran it at 20%. I think that's a fair number. We would say somewhere normally 5 to 10%. 20 is probably nearing the top. But nonetheless, you've executed it. It's nice because you can run it once when you're refreshing the client, and then that should be good. You shouldn't have to worry about number ranges at all. Now, you've mentioned having an issue. I think what we'll have to do is probably take your specific issue offline. If you haven't had a support case on this recently, I would encourage you to submit one and we can work with you individually. The only thing that comes to my mind is 2 things. Number one, I don't know for sure that your NRIV table, NRIV being where the number range intervals is stored, if that was copied as part of your refresh. We do recommend that it be included in that master data load. And then, so what happens is, if you're doing that from production, your NRIV table in your target client is going to mimic or mirror what it is in production, right? So it's N equals N. And then the 20% buffer or 10% or whatever you're going to run the utility at will create that N plus 1. That's that buffer of 15%, 20%, whatever, that buys you that buffer where you can still safely copy data down from prod into lower level systems and still create natively transacted data in the target client without those coming into conflict. So I think maybe NRIV, whether that was copied, might be an issue. The other thing too is, and I guess I should share here really quick, if you don't mind, Jamie, I'm going to just share.
There you go.
Okay. And what I want to make clear here as well. So here on the left is I have our number range utility solution. This is the 20% that Christian's talking about, like he would have put 20% in there, hit the update database. I'm assuming that it was done probably for all number range objects. Krishna, do you understand that you do have the capability to be flexible? Did somebody run this for perhaps less than all number range objects? I don't know. So that might be another part of the root cause. And then the last point I wanted to bring up, which is why I really wanted to share my screen, is that we have this number range table exceptions, and you should have this table with ideally these dozen or so entries in here. You mentioned Fagoflex, which is why I was thinking about this, is we have learned that there are some number range objects that should not be included in the buffer. It will cause other issues. And so we created this exceptions table. This has also been around for a while, although it certainly wasn't part of the first or second versions of the solution. And ideally, this table will be here with these populated. If not, we should get these populated and then revisit your topic just to see if that resolves the issue. Because again, these are the ones that you would not want to include. And so by putting these entries in here, it doesn't matter then if you're using all number range objects, because it's basically all minus whatever you have in here. Okay. So there's the two or three. There's two or three topics there that might be relevant to the question, but without actually digging into the specific issue, it's hard to understand what exactly the root cause is.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. All right. Well, I think that is it. That was an amazing session. Thank you, everyone. Just a couple of updates. We do have some changes, very exciting changes coming to Talk to Experts Tuesday. More information is to come on that. So you can go ahead and use the QR codes here. With the one on the left, the support updates blog will take you to the support updates blog, and that is a blog that is written by Qlik Digital Support, and they give any information about any product releases or any issues that are coming up in any of our software platforms, and just kind of general knowledge that's happening out in Qlik support. You can find all that information there. And then there's also the Talk to Experts Tuesday page, which is what I took you to just a little bit earlier. You can subscribe to both of these pages. That way you are notified when new blog posts or new events pop up on Talk to Experts Tuesday. So if you want to go ahead and subscribe to those pages, you can be in the know as soon as the event or blog hits. Again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. We do have the Qlik swag raffle, so stay tuned for the announcement on that. If you fill out the survey, you are automatically entered. So once we end the session, you will get that prompt to fill out that survey. So please do that. It takes less than a minute. You also have the ability to give any one of our panelists a shout out for today, which they do get compensated via our reward system internally. So please be sure to give our amazing panelists some shout outs today. So thank you everyone again, and especially Steve George, Lindsay Foster, and Steve Chabala. You guys were amazing today. Thank you again so much, and we'll see everyone next month. Have a wonderful day, everyone.